10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, hello everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. Happy to be with you again here on this Saturday night. This is March 9th. And yes, I should be out. I should probably be having fun. But instead, I'm here. And what I do on my weekends are I study and read up, as I do throughout the entire week, on all the different issues that are going on to find out more information and to be able to speak with you about it. Because I love you guys. You guys really, you make the difference. You're the reason why I'm home on a Saturday night talking with you instead of being out and drinking or doing whatever. So the reason why I'm here today, though, is I wanted to take a moment to speak with you about something that I ran into. Now, as I was searching through the internet and checking on various issues, I was reminded of something, and I'm going to walk you through it with me. Okay, back in, I think it was back in 2009, matter of fact, it was. In 2009, October of 2009, I had written an article back on my Voss Political Commentary site, so you can just see it right there, in case you want to go check it out yourself. And I was writing about global warming. And in particular, I've been talking about Lord Monckton. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with him, but he's an individual of note in the climate change discussion. And he pointed out a lot of things about global warming, which we now call climate change, which used to be called global cooling. It goes through a lot of different names over the years. But he pointed out a couple of things that were very interesting. And one of the things that he was taking on was Al Gore and Al Gore's movie, which was very, it lacked a lot of factual credibility, to be honest. And so once he brought up a couple of things, and some of those things were the fact that we only have accurate records of temperature for 120 years, and everything else is based on guesswork, essentially. Scientific guesswork, but guesswork all the same. That there are more polar bears now than when Al Gore's movie first came out. That there's more sea ice, and continues, even now in 2019, more sea ice than had been predicted. And that all of the predictions were wrong by all of the global warming extremists. And we saw that over and over again. And so that's what Lord Monckton was talking about in 2009 when everyone was first getting into this idea that global warming was devastating, that climate change was going to destroy the world once again. It's a theory that's been around since, at least as long as I've been around, since the 1970s. Then it was global cooling. And so in reading about that, and I followed it up and I followed the issue over the years. And in 2015, I wrote an article, which happened to be, it was a Facebook commentary, but I reposted it. And it was about climate change. And what happens if climate change actually gained traction? What would we see happen in the world? Would there be an end to ISIS? Would there be an end to famine around the world? Would there be an end to mass murders, shootings, anything? Would any of this change if we were to spend $117 trillion, which is the minimum that it's expected to cost, and stopping everything in the world? There would be no new iPads, no new iPhones, no new technology. You wouldn't be building anything new, no new cars. Everything in the world has to stop in every country in the world to be able to hit the global estimates for greenhouse gases to bring the world into a space that everyone would be able to survive in. That's what the global warming, climate change alarmists have told us, that we have to stop everything everywhere in the world to be able to reach these numbers. Because if China doesn't listen, if India doesn't listen, if 2/3 of Africa doesn't listen, well, the world is doomed. Everybody dies because the temperature will go up 1 degree and it's all over. And so that brought me to what's the most recent iteration of this. Well, that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Back on February 7th, I wrote the article right after she came out with her Green New Deal. And she talked about how she wants to get rid of 260 million cars. She wants to get rid of planes. She wants to get rid of boats and ships and cargo ships with all the goods that we need to make all the things that we live with in the world. That she wants to refurbish 76 million buildings, every single home, every single skyscraper, the Sears Tower, the Empire State Building, everything has to be redone to be global warming and to get renewable energy everywhere in the country. And this, if we do it, and hopefully because China, if we do it, China and India and 2/3 of Africa will do it as well, then the world will be safe. But she mostly focuses on the United States. If the United States actually does this, then everyone's going to be safe. Everyone will be saved. And that was her big pitch on February 7th of 2019. And so I just happened to be looking through the internet. I like to search and research things. And that's when I ran into a gentleman by the name of Michael Schellenberg. Now, you may not know who Michael Schellenberg is. I didn't. Michael Schellenberg happens to be a eco-fanatic of the biggest sense. He was Time Magazine's Hero of the Environment in 2008. He was the 2008 winner of the Green Book Award. He was a co-editor of the book Love Your Monsters in 2011. He is one of the people who helped to coin the frame ecological modernist. This guy is green energy, green everything through and through, okay? There's no question. He's everything about what you would think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is talking about in her Green New Deal. He is a climate change globalist, global warming kind of guy, and a leader in this. And he has a lot to say about the issue. He's one of the people that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her team, when they were working over the weekend to create the Green New Deal, this is probably some of the material he wrote that they were working on and he also created the Breakthrough Institute. They were looking at his research and his writings to try and give them the ideas that they put into the Green New Deal. Now, this is all very important and very interesting for a simple reason. Because on January 4th of 2019, he had a TED Talk. And I'm only going to give you a couple of excerpts from that. And you can look it up on YouTube and you'll see the whole thing. And I'll include the link at the bottom of the description. But this is what he also had to say about what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Green New Deal means. The first thing he has to say is,
our efforts really paid off in 2007, when then presidential candidate Barack Obama embraced our vision. And between 2009 and 2015, the U.S. invested $150 billion in renewables and other kinds of clean tech. But right away, we started to encounter some problems. So first of all, the electricity from solar rooftops ends up costing about twice as much as the electricity from solar farms. And both solar farms and wind farms require covering a pretty significant amount of land with solar panels and wind turbines, and also building very big transmission lines to bring all that electricity from the countryside into the city. Both of those things were often very strongly resisted by local communities, as well as by conservation biologists who were concerned about the impacts on wild bird species and other animals. Now, there was a lot of other people working on technical solutions at the time. One of the big challenges, of course, is just the intermittency of solar and wind. They only generate electricity about 10 to 30% of the time during most of the year. But
wait a minute, did you hear what he was saying there? He worked with Obama, and he was part of getting the $150 billion from the United States to build up the green energy, the climate change, to fight this, to protect the environment for everyone. That was Michael Schellenberg at the TED Talk, talking about what he's done. And then he said something that you probably haven't heard before, something that's actually kind of important. Renewable energy is intermittent. Getting it from the wind or from the sun is only 10 to 30% of the time available. That it's not consistent, and that it's not usable, and that there were problems, that to be able to collect the wind or the solar, well, that destroys the environment. Something that the green energy people, the Green New Deal, they don't talk about. Destroying the environment. The very thing that many of the eco-terrorists or eco-fanatics out there, that they love. The environment. That's what this is for. We're saving the climate because we're saving the environment. Except, no. To be able to do what they're saying with renewable energy, you have to destroy the environment. And the very same people who want the Green New Deal are the very same people who are saying you can't destroy the environment to do it. Well, that's kind of interesting. He's saying that it doesn't work. It's not effective. Okay, that's something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't mention. That's something that we really haven't heard from the climate change people. They're never mentioning the how and what's involved. They just mentioned that you're not going to have planes anymore. They didn't say that. So I listened more because I like to hear what other people on the other side say. I have to understand if I'm right. What the things that I think and I've been writing about over the years, are they true? Is the information different? So he goes on and he says something else that I thought that was equally just as surprising.
Deaths. Over time, it gradually struck me that there was really no amount of technological innovation that was going to make the sun shine more regularly or wind blow more reliably. In fact, you could make solar panels cheaper, you could make wind turbines bigger, but sunlight and wind are just really dilute fuels. And in order to produce significant amounts of electricity, you just have to cover a very large landmass with them. In other words, all of the major problems with renewables aren't technical. They're natural.
Wow. Did you hear that? This man who worked with Obama with $150 billion in California to create climate change, things to improve the environment, not only is it unreliable to have solar and to have wind, they don't work. The problems are inherent not in technology, but in nature itself. That there's your inherent problem. It's the nature. The renewable, the source of the renewable energy is the problem of renewable energy collection. That's got to be groundbreaking. And I'm sure there are probably students out there right now who are saying, no, I can't believe that. Have you actually thought about it? I would say to them. To anyone who's into the Green New Deal, did you actually check and find out, is it reliable? How reliable? Does it work? And while we're talking about whether it works or not, he goes on. Mr. Schellenberg has some other thoughts about what does work, what kind of energy is available and renewable and usable.
Just take, for instance, what's happened in California. At the period in which solar panels have come down in price very significantly, same with wind, we've seen our electricity prices go up 5 times more than the rest of the country. And it's not unique to us. You can see the same phenomenon happened in Germany, which is really the world's leader in solar, wind, and other renewable technologies. Their prices increased 50% during their big renewable energy push. Now, you might think, well, dealing with climate change is just going to require that we all pay more for energy. That's what I used to think. But consider the case of France. France actually gets twice as much of its electricity from clean, zero-emission sources than does Germany. And yet, France pays half as much, almost half as much for its electricity. How can that be? Well, you might have already anticipated the answer. France gets most of its electricity from nuclear power, about 75% in total. And nuclear just ends up being a lot more reliable, generating power 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for about 90% of the year. We see this phenomenon show up at a global level. So, for example, there's been a natural experiment over the last 40 years, even more than that, in terms of the deployment of nuclear and the deployment of solar. You can see that at a little bit higher cost, we got about half as much electricity from solar and wind than we did from nuclear. Well, what does all this mean for going forward? I think one of the most significant findings to date is this one. Had Germany spent $580 billion on nuclear instead of renewables, it would already be getting 100% of its electricity from clean energy sources and all of its transportation energy.
Wow. That's amazing. Because according to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, according to the Green New Deal, that if we were to go to renewable energy, this would save money, that this would lower the cost of electricity for everyone. Except in California, in the real world, it actually costs more money. That it's more expensive to have solar and wind as your primary source of electricity. Nuclear, in fact, the one thing that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is completely against and will not have. She's as much against nuclear power as she is against gas and oil. Well, she's saying that that's the worst thing you could possibly have, except that's exactly what France and Germany are using. In fact, France is making tons of it. It's their primary source of energy. And I know everyone loves to talk about horror stories, except when was the last time you heard about a horror story of nuclear power in France? Well, I haven't. And you don't. It's one of the safest forms of energy out there. And it turns out it's one of the most reliable and one of the most consistent and one of the cheapest. Even more so than Germany, which has gone full on with the climate change renewable energy efforts. That's amazing. But I didn't hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez address any of this. I didn't hear any of the people who were talking about the Green New Deal, all of the 2020 presidential candidates. None of them had mentioned that. None of them had talked about that. You have to wonder why. I mean, the cost. What if the cost is cheaper? Is it really that much cheaper? I had to ask and I had to wonder. And that's when I listened to this.
What about environmental impact? Well, I think a really easy way to think about it is that uranium fuel, which is what we use to power nuclear plants, is just really energy dense. About the same amount of uranium as this Rubik's Cube can power all of the energy that you need in your entire life. As a consequence, you just don't need that much land in order to produce a significant amount of electricity. Here we can compare the solar farm I just described, Ivanpah, to California's last nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon. It takes 450 times more land to generate the same amount of electricity as it does from nuclear. You would need 17 more solar farms like Ivanpah in order to generate the same output as Diablo Canyon, and of course it would then be unreliable. Well, what about the mining and the waste and the material throughput? Well, this has been studied pretty closely as well, and it just turns out that solar panels require 17 times more materials than nuclear plants do, in the form of cement, glass, concrete, steel, and that includes all the fuel used for those nuclear plants. The consequence is that what comes out at the end, since it's material throughput, is just not a lot of waste from nuclear. All of the waste from the Swiss nuclear program fits into this room. Nuclear waste is actually the only waste from electricity production that's safely contained and internalized. Every other way of making electricity emits the waste into the natural environment, either as pollution or as material waste. We tend to think of solar panels as clean, but the truth is that there is no plan to deal with solar panels at the end of their 20 or 25-year life. A lot of experts are actually very concerned that solar panels are just going to be shipped to poor countries in Africa or Asia with the rest of our electronic waste stream to be disassembled, often exposing people to really high levels of toxic elements, including lead, cadmium, and chromium, elements that, because they're elements, their toxicity never declines over time.
Wow. Wow. More that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her team, over the weekend that they put this all together, this great idea of the Green New Deal, of being able to save the world and save America, they kind of left out the fact that it takes 17 times more land to equal the power of one nuclear plant. That it takes 17 times more materials, which means more things that could affect the climate. 17 times more than a nuclear plant. Wow, that's incredible. They didn't mention that every 20 years, all the solar panels have to be replaced. Can you imagine that? 76 million homes every 20 years, let's even call it 25, have to be replaced. You have to take it all down and put it back up. Imagine that cost. Imagine all that effort to try and replace every single solar panel in the country every 20 years, every 25 years. That's incredible, the amount of cost that it would be. And remember, 76 million buildings with solar panels would all be dumped somewhere that no one knows where to put it. All that waste, all of the toxicity, chromium, all over the place, has to be dumped somewhere, which probably would go to Africa. That's where a lot of the electronics show up. And so all the people in Africa and all the ecology and all of the economy of Africa would be impacted by this waste. And maybe it doesn't go to Africa. Where would it go? The Middle East? Maybe it goes to Antarctica? I mean, where do you put it all? And that's a very interesting question, because isn't that something that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would be against, to not have this waste? Isn't that why she's doing it? Because we have to build all new solar panels as well. And again, you're having that cycle of just more and more. And that's just from the United States. We haven't taken into account all of Europe, Canada, Mexico, China, India, Africa itself. How much waste are we talking about? And how much land do you have to deforest? Imagine how much you have to deforest just to run South America or Africa, India. Wow. I mean, that's something that should blow your mind. If these are things that you think are very important and you think that this is what the Green New Deal is answering, then wouldn't you want to know this? Shouldn't Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez include that in her bill? Shouldn't she have an answer for that? I mean, I would think that these are some of the things you would have to wonder about, but I know what you're thinking. For some people out there who are watching this and they're saying, well, don't worry. You know what? We're going to get it all from the gas and oil companies. They're going to be able to, we're going to take away their money. That's going to help resolve the whole problem because we just need to get rid of oil and gas, right? Well, back to Michael Schellenberger again.
In order to deal with climate change, we're just going to need all the different kinds of clean energy that we have. The problem is that just turns out not to be true. You remember I discussed France a little bit ago. France gets most of its electricity from nuclear. If France were to try to significantly scale up solar and wind, it would also have to significantly reduce how much electricity it gets from nuclear. That's because in order to handle the huge variability of solar and wind on the grid, they would need to burn more natural gas. Think of it this way, it's just really hard to ramp up and down a nuclear plant, whereas I think we're all pretty familiar with turning the natural gas up and down on our stove. A similar process works in managing the grid. Of course, it goes without saying that oil and gas companies understand this pretty well, which is why we've seen them invest millions of dollars in recent years in promoting solar and wind. This just raises, I think, another challenging question, which is that in places that are using a lot of nuclear or have grids that are mostly nuclear and hydro, going towards solar and wind and other renewables would actually increase carbon emissions.
Oh my God. Isn't that incredible? If you get rid of the nuclear, you're going to increase the amount of global warming that's happening. You're going to need to use more coal, more natural gas, oil and gas. You have to use more of it if you're using renewable energy, because renewable energy is 10 to 30% efficient. Wow. You didn't hear that from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she spent an entire weekend researching this. She spent an entire weekend putting together a bill to fix the world. And she didn't realize that 1 month before, this man, Michael Schellenberger, who is an environmentalist and a leading environmentalist, who has already received $150 billion from the Obama administration, not the right. He wasn't with any of the prior presidents from the right. You know, we're talking about, any of them, actually. So this is a dyed-in-the-wool leftist. And he's telling you you're going to actually give more money to oil and gas companies than you're going to take away from them because you go to renewable energy, because renewable energy doesn't work. That everything that is in the Green New Deal fails because she's, obviously she must have spoken to an expert who was in the Obama administration, who spent $150 billion trying to do what she says she wants to do to the entire nation, that she wants to see happen to the entire world. Now, if all of this is shaking up your mind and making you say, what's going on? Something is wrong with this. Something is wrong with this whole argument. Well, here's the final thoughts from Michael Schellenberger.
I think it's natural that those of us that became very concerned about climate change, such a big environmental issue, would gravitate towards really romantic solutions like harmonizing human civilization with the natural world using renewable energies. But I think it's also understandable that as the facts have come in, that many of us have started to question our prior beliefs and change our minds. For me, the question now is, now that we know that renewables can't save the planet, are we going to keep letting them destroy it?
There you go. That's the answer. Yes, you feel like the Green New Deal, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialists, they have the right answer. You feel like there needs to be something done about climate change with renewable energy. You feel that that's right. And that's your romantic feel. It sounds so great. It makes you feel warm and fuzzy. And you're wrong. And you're wrong. As the environmentalist is telling you, you are wrong. That doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. That it is not right. That's what he's saying. And in every facet and in every attempt, the entire structure of it is wrong. So you don't have to believe me in 2009. Don't have to believe me in 2015. You don't have to believe me, Michael Voss, in 2019. But Michael Schellenberger, you should believe. He spent $150 billion of taxpayer dollars under President Obama, one of the most liberal presidents the nation has ever seen, trying to make it work. In the state, California, the most liberal in the nation. I know Governor Cuomo is upset about that, but the fact is that is the progressive capital of the nation in California, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it gives more problems than it resolves. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Mike, you just haven't been fair. These are edits on this, and you didn't show the whole thing that he was speaking about. And you know what? You're right. I didn't show the whole thing that he was speaking about. And I can tell you, most people don't even know about it because there was only 14,211 people who have seen this video. This is a TED Talk. And I'm showing you right now on the screen. And I'm going to tell you that you can go to YouTube and look up why renewables can't save the planet. Michael Schellenberger, TED. This is a TED Talk. And you can just pull that up for yourself. Look at the entire 30 minutes. Actually, it's 17 minutes and 32 seconds. His entire conversation. Listen to him. Look it up. Check it for yourself. I took more time than he did to explain the whole thing. But maybe this motivates you because no one's paying attention to what's really happening. And it is important. Ask the questions. Realize what are the facts. And as much as you may have the feeling, the facts are what's true. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is wrong. The Democratic Socialists, including the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates, so far, they're all wrong. Renewable energy is not the answer in the way they are presenting it to you, and they're not telling you the whole story. Before you go whole hog on this, before you drag the entire nation on this, go check it out for yourself. But I wanted to share that with you. I hope you found it interesting. If you think I'm wrong, if you think Michael Schellenberger is wrong, please leave it in the notes. Leave us a comment. We're always happy to hear your thoughts. And until the next time, I hope everyone is well. Thank you.